Good afternoon and welcome to Wellbeing Wednesday Live. It's been a little while since we've been here. It's been about a month. As I mentioned before, I had to kind of rationalize a bit how I used my time, but I did promise that we would be back, and we are back. I will shortly introduce a very special guest I have with us today. But let me tell you a little bit, if it's your first time joining us on Wellbeing Wednesday Live, and welcome, of course, as well if you're watching this back as a replay. Wellbeing Wednesday Live is something that we launched at the start of lockdown to really bring some wellbeing tips and support to teachers and parents, primarily for themselves, but also, of course, to support their children and teens throughout this particularly unusual time that we're all going through globally at the moment. So Wellbeing Wednesday Live is brought to you by Educate to Flourish, which is a UK-based community interest company. So we're a not-for-profit organisation, and we exist solely to support flourishing of children. So we do that in a number of ways. We deliver workshops and various training events to children of all ages, as well as their teachers and their parents. We also support research in schools. So for example, one of the things that we do is we work on a number of projects supporting action research projects by teachers and also non-teaching staff, support staff in schools, into various well-being and character education, positive education interventions in schools, so that they can actually try things out, see what works, report back on it, and share their findings with the wider education community. And we do a lot of teacher professional ongoing development in schools as well, whether it's full days or just twilight after school sessions. So that's what Educate to Flourish do. And I will also briefly tell you a little bit about me as what I do. So I am Frederica Roberts. I'm the founder of Educate to Flourish, and I'm also the managing director of the organization. And I've been working in the field of positive psychology for a few years now. I've been working as a speaker and trainer and also as an author in this sector, particularly within the area of education. I'm a former teacher. I've taught French and German in secondary schools in the UK. Before that, I also taught English language to adults, also here in the UK. And I'm absolutely passionate about bringing more well-being into education, and through studying positive psychology, I've really wanted to focus on education as I've progressed my speaking and training. I also do a little bit of postgraduate level lecturing in positive education as well. So the focus is always about bringing positive psychology and character strengths into education. As you can see on the screen there, I've written a few books on the subject. Recipe for Happiness was my first one in 2013, which is a generic kind of self-help, a few tips on happiness and well-being, and then the other two are on education. So I co-wrote Character Toolkit for Teachers with Elizabeth Wright, published by Jessica Kingsley Publishers, and then Educate to Flourish, which came out in Kindle or ebook format on the 18th of June and is coming out as a paperback on the 21st of August, was also published by Jessica Kingsley Publishers. And it's a book all about whole school positive education, giving lots and lots of case studies of how people around the world have introduced or expanded their well-being measures in education and their character education provision. And my book coming out on the 21st of August and being published by Jessica Kingsley Publishers really brings me to the guest for today, whom I will now bring onto screen with me. And our guest today is Aidan Harvey-Craig. Welcome, Aidan. Oh, my brain's gone. Welcome, Aidan. I was combining your first name and surname there. So, Aidan is a teacher in an international school in Malawi, and he is also an author in well-being. He's just written, just as in, because it's about to come out, 18 Wellbeing Hacks for Students, which is also being published by Jessica Kingsley Publishers, and also on the 21st of August. So a great day for books in the world of education, the 21st of August. Absolutely. So welcome, Aidan, and I will hand over to you shortly, of course, to talk to us all about some of your hacks and introduce yourself a bit more fully as well. But I'd like to invite our viewers now, if you'd like to join in with an activity which I call the emotional temperature. So I'm going to ask you to go to another browser or your phone and go open a browser there and type in polev.com, and you can either put / and then Frederica Rob 992, or you can just go to polev.com and then when it asks you for a username, put in Frederica Rob 992, and you can see that on your screen there. So Aidan and I have filled ours in, so we're both excited, as you can see there. Yes, a mixture of words there. So, you know, I'm seeing content as well, energized. I put the little emoji. You can put single words or you can put emojis in as well. I put the little love emoji because both my daughters are here at the moment this week, so I'm feeling all the love at the moment. And it's great to see some words appearing there. So thank you very much for joining in. Keep those coming. I'll keep an eye on that. If I see more appearing, I might just share that as we go along as well, just to see how that evolves. But I will now bring Craig back onto the screen, and I'll hand over to you, Craig. No, not
Aidan.
Craig. Do you know,
it's struggling with Aidan.
The heat. Yes, it's Aidan. I do apologize. So I'll bring it back to you, Aidan, and I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself fully and to tell us about your wellbeing hacks. So over to you.
Thank you. Well, I mean, first of all, thanks so much for having me as a guest here. I really appreciate it. And I mean, in terms of me, I'm a secondary school teacher. I teach psychology, and I've been a secondary school teacher, I guess, for about 13 years. I'm starting to lose track, but something along those lines. In the last 3 years ago, I took a job out in Malawi in an international school. So I'm currently working at an international school in Malawi. What happened? I mean, a couple of years ago, I was having a late night conversation with a very old friend of mine whose son was having a really difficult time with a very troublesome relationship. And my friend, who was the father, we were talking, and he was really getting really towards his wit's end to some extent, because he really didn't know what to do and what was going on or anything like that. And something about that conversation got me started thinking that I am talking day in, day out in my job to teenagers and young people about psychology. And I am seeing a lot of the wellbeing issues that come up in the classroom, but also, seeing nationally the picture of sort of decline in wellbeing to some extent, or problems that are arising, and that maybe I should do something about putting those two things together and do something where I can talk about the psychology of well-being, using my experience of psychology and of interacting with the young people that I teach. So when I started having a look at some of the psychology sort of self-help books, what sort of struck me from that is that, in psychology, very often you get into a specialism and you become a cognitive psychologist or a neuroscientist or psychodynamic psychologist or whatever it might be. And so a lot of the books seem to be focused on one particular field of psychology. And what I really wanted to do was just scan the whole of psychology and do different chapters where I could just pick out one really easy to apply technique from a different field of psychology. That's why I call it a hack, because I try and make it very simple and straightforward. And then explain a little bit more about the psychology under it and how you can apply it and what have you, and then move on chapter after chapter coming in. So you said that I could then cover all those different, social psychology, a bit of neuroscience, a bit of cognitive and what have you. And so I put 3 chapters together and sent them off to Jessica Kingsley, as you mentioned earlier. And somewhat to my surprise, they said, we really like this and we want you to do it. So I spent the next year working on that. And I think it was also partly just coming into Malawi and being getting right out of the routine of day-to-day life in England also helped me to think about that and to kind of have the sort of intellectual and emotional space to be able to generate that kind of, and to write the book. And it was really tough, it was such a satisfying process to go through. finished that about a year or so ago, and as you say, it's coming out shortly.
Can I ask you, Aidan, because it's interesting, because you've mentioned how it came about in terms of, your conversation with another adult about frustrations with his son and not knowing which way to go and to turn. And obviously it's 18 Wellbeing Hacks for Students. Is this book written for parents and teachers primarily to support their own kids, or is it aimed also at the kids themselves, teenagers perhaps, to read?
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's a really good question. It's written directly to the student. It's kind of for older students. It's really for kind of 16 to 24-year-old market, roughly, because I deal a lot with sixth formers. So essentially, I was thinking about sixth formers as I was writing it, but it has that, a bit of leeway either side. But that said, but that was really because when I was starting to write it and talking to the editor, it just came across a lot more clearly if I was just talking directly to the student. But that said, my hope is that the adults will pick it up and use it as a kind of tool, maybe to start conversations, or just to mean that they can understand some of the issues that are going on, if they're a teacher, or if they've got teenage children or what have you. So it's written directly to the student, but my hope is that it will be useful for both students and adults.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be. Yeah. And I love the concept of the hacks, and it's just a really, having a look at sort of the chapter titles, it's really straightforward and direct and very accessible. It's a lovely.
Yeah, that was something I was really thank you. I was really trying to do. And I mean, as I was going through it, the hacks really grouped into three in my mind. So I split them up into what I call notice, energize, and connect. So notice are hacks. There's quite a lot of mindfulness stuff about that. It's really about noticing thoughts and emotions. There's also a thing about mindful eating and what have you. Also something about music, because I think music is so important to teenagers, and we don't often have conversations with teenagers about music and the huge power that it has for well-being, and all the different things that you can do it, and you can use it on purpose for all kinds of different ways. So that was another of them. There was one of them that came up is called Name Your Emotions, which obviously is a very simple idea, but it came across this idea of emodiversity, which is basically just the fact that if you're able to articulate a large range of emotions, it means that you're better able to regulate and deal with your emotions. And it's quite a nice analogy with biodiversity, where if you've got an ecosystem which is biodiverse, it means that it's much more resilient, because a disease or a predator comes in, it can only kill one or two of the organisms, but the ecosystem itself survives. And in a similar sort of way to that, you've got with your emodiversity, if you're diverse in the emotions that you're able to be in touch with and to name and notice, it means that it's a bit harder for just one single emotion to come and completely overwhelm you. And there's a really nice, the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence have done some really nice work on that, developed something called a mood meter, which makes it, really provides a map of emotions, because if you underlying all the emotions, something called core effect, which is based on something called the circumplex. I know you know all this, but I'm going to explain it as if nobody knows it. But a circumplex, which is on 2 dimensions. So you have high energy to low energy, and then pleasure to displeasure, and all of the emotions can kind of be mapped onto that. So right over in displeasure, high energy would be fury and panic, really horrible to feel emotions, not bad emotions, but unpleasant ones, but very high energy. And then high energy pleasure would be something like ecstasy, where you're very high energy, but it's a pleasurable one. If you drop down then to low energy but high pleasure, you get down to serene and something really calm. And then right over on the other corner with low energy and displeasure would be hopelessness and things like that. I think something like that, where you start to map out, you've got the kind of coordinates of that. And then as you go towards the center of the circumflex, you have the same things, but you get less intense. So you might go from sort of fury to anger to annoyed to uneasy. And you can start to really sort of place yourself along these dimensions, and it's quite a nice way of starting to talk about emotions, but in yourself, but also if you're discussing emotions with younger people, obviously that it can be hard at times for them to articulate where they are and things. If there's a sort of physical space to it, it could become a little bit more easy, and they could kind of even point to where they are on that, and then maybe you could fill in that with actual words of what suggested words of emotions that might fit there. It's not an exact science. It's not as if you've got an exact plot for fury and another one for surprise or anything like that, which I think also makes it quite nice and unthreatening, because you can kind of play around with it and come up with your own version of where those emotions go. But
I found that when I've done this, I've done that kind of activity as a class activity sometimes with some of the older students. And actually what makes it really interesting is the debates around where emotions should go. So I do in kind of two steps. The first one is giving them the challenge to identify as many possible emotions as possible, as they can come up with. And I do it with letters of the alphabet. So, trying to come up with all the different emotions for different letters of the alphabet. And then actually doing this categorizing where they put it on the various axes, because, it's that, for example, I talk about rather than pleasure and displeasure, I talk about it in terms of positive or negative, but in the context of how it makes you feel and what it results in. And you take something like anger, for example, and it can have some really interesting debates about well, is it a positive emotion or is it a negative one? It tends to be quite high energy a lot of the time, but actually it can be really positive if it spurs you on to fight for social justice, for example, and that kind of thing. Absolutely. So it's a really interesting activity to do, isn't it? And for people to do that individually as well.
Yeah. And I think that's important, because I think it also gets across the idea that that this, especially when you talk about the kind of the importance of emo diversity, is that all of those emotions at some point are going to have a use and a function. Obviously, some of them are less enjoyable than others, but just as you just pointed out, anger is a perfectly functional emotion to have in some sense, some cases, as is sadness, absolutely. And I think it's something about having the map or an idea of a map or a physical space for those. It means that you can realize that even when you are desperately feeling really sad, the rest of the map is still there, and you're going to get back over to the happier or the calmer places at times. It's not that you're not going to be kind of what I think emo diversity is all about, is the fact that you've got actually, part of the joy of being human is having that, all of those, that kind of rich palette of emotions, and to try maybe not to be scared of the ones that are less pleasurable, or the ones that we tend to think about as bad, as you say, or there's almost, there can almost be there's sort of shame around some of the things about, you're not supposed to feel down, and you're not supposed to get angry, so you try and keep yourself always in one section of that map. But actually, the really good thing is to be able to express, or to notice, and to just accept and acknowledge all of those things, and that's really what being human is about. And in fact, that's kind of goes, like, one of the things I talk about in terms of how you develop that is one of the things is actually a really key one is reading, because there's just there's almost no better way of discovering emotions, because you get to kind of step inside the head of lots of fictional characters and hear the way that other people describe emotions in those characters. But the other one would be to be open about your own emotions and be talking about them, even if they are negative ones, and not try too much to shield young people from that and think, well, I mustn't tell them that I'm down, or I mustn't tell them that I'm anxious, or what have you, because if you can do it right, you can kind of get discussions around those different types of emotion, you can help a young person then develop their emotional literacy, and that's going to be a good thing for them to deal with emotions in the longer term.
That's fantastic. And I think emotions are such a complex area, really, within psychology and within the realm of well-being. And it's something that we really don't teach children that much, from a young age to really articulate and understand and yes, to accept, because, so much of what we do as parents as well as teachers, I think, is to some extent try and shield children from the emotions that are less pleasant, because we don't want them to not feel happy. We don't want them to feel distraught, but actually they need to be able to handle those emotions and to know how to bring themselves back, don't they? And that's part of the well-being picture.
Yeah.
So that's really good.
So that's kind of notice, and then energize. There's things about breathing and sleep. Obviously, I mean, sleep is just it's just phenomenally. It's like the bedrock of well-being. It seems to me. If you're not doing, if you're not getting that right, then so much of the rest of the well-being stuff is just not going to fall into place. So quite a bit about sleep and the importance of some relatively basic techniques like routine and trying to get us 8-hour sleep opportunity and cool dark room and things like that. Lots of stuff about breathing. Again, that's a kind of magic key, it seems to me, into you just slowing the breathing down, triggering the parasympathetic nervous system so that you can use the body to physically calm yourself down, and then your mind will hopefully follow. But I also talk a little bit about I came across a thing called kintsugi, which is an ancient Japanese art of mending pottery. It's the one you probably know about it, but it's you have a broken pottery and you put it together using resin and gold paint so that you actually accentuate the cracks rather than trying to cover them up. And I use that as a way of talking about perfectionism, because again, I think perfectionism is certainly in my experience is quite a pervasive thing for teenagers at times, and it seems as though perfectionism is on the rise, and it's probably to do with the fact that we have a sort of increasingly a kind of competitive individualism where ultimately we've got getting to a state where rather than just going out and getting a job, you're almost a personal brand all the time. You're on LinkedIn and social media and everything like that. So there's increasingly a kind of pressure to present yourself as a kind of great a potential employee or whatever it might be, or and also in the social sphere, as a brilliant friend on social media, a person who's got loads of interesting things going on in their life. So perfectionism on the rise, and there's something nice about using kintsugi, where you talk about the process of kintsugi. First of all, you have a pot with broken pieces. First thing you have to do is soften the sharp edges. So that's analogous to if you do feel broken, or if something really something really bad has happened, then you do need to soften the sharp edges of pain, and that might be about talking to somebody. It might be it might be as much as seeing a therapist, or it might just be informal conversations, but you do need to address that. And then when you put the pieces back together with the resin, you have to hold them in place, and it takes time, and you need patience. You're not going to heal those cracks overnight. But what's interesting about that is that when those cracks do heal in the pottery, they're stronger than the piece was before. They're stronger than the ceramic before. And so you can make the point that maybe if you take the time to heal, you're actually going to come out stronger than you were before. And then lastly, the whole point of having the cracks painted in gold is because they look beautiful. And they look beautiful for a number of reasons. One is that they show that piece of pottery is unique. It's been through some things, it's had some tough times, but that's made it unique. There's no other piece that has those exact cracks. And it also shows that it's a piece that somebody really cares about, that's worth repairing. and that's kind of important. So both of those things, you can see how there's a kind of analogy, quite a nice analogy there, with not trying to cover up the fact that you have had heartbreak or pain or whatever it might be, or that you are you feel imperfect in some way, that actually that is part of what makes you unique, and that if you've had to heal, and all of us, you can't live a kind of full life without having some kind of brokenness, feeling as though that you've been broken in some way. Showing that you've taken the time and to put that back together, and it makes you unique. It's perhaps made you stronger. There's some really nice ways that you can use that really physical, obvious use of kintsugi to make those points that are otherwise a little bit sort of abstract at times.
Yeah.
The other one, so that from Energize, that I quite like, is about doing nothing, or at least doing almost nothing. That
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah, almost.
Well, what was interesting was that I came across in the neuroscientific literature, was talking about the fact that almost by accident, a thing called the default mode in the brain was discovered really quite recently, in the 1990s, I think it was. And it sounded to me as though it was while people were left in a brain scanner between being asked to do all crazy things for experiments, when it was just kind of lying there waiting for the next thing to happen in a psychology experiment in a brain scanner. They were a specific pattern of brain activity was found, and it's called a default mode, and it's a really, really important brain activity. It's like daydreaming, essentially. So it's a sort of situation where you can drift backward and forward in time, and you can think about how you dealt with situations, what you would do in the future, how you relate to people. And it's a very important thing for creativity and identity formation, which again, in terms of identity, are particularly useful for teenagers. But the thing is, if you do absolutely nothing, you can end up ruminating and just going over and over negative thoughts.
Yeah.
But if you do a very undemanding task, like colouring in or sort of craft type things, or just going for a walk with no particular purpose, something that's very easy to do, but what that does is it kind of takes up enough brain activity to stop you from ruminating, hopefully, but it frees you up to do the good stuff that the default mode system for your brain can do, and it has all kinds of really, really good well-being effects. And the problem is, of course, that with smartphones, all of that time that used to, the gaps where a lot of that used to happen tend to get filled up, because staring at a screen and swiping through a screen is absolutely not doing nothing. It's quite focused attention, so it blasts away all of that thing. So trying to make some time for doing almost nothing is really important.
Yeah, that's a really important point, and that brings us nicely already. I can't believe how quickly the time has gone to almost the end of this week's Wellbeing Wednesday Live. So as you can see, I have a little screen up there with your Twitter handles. So if you'd like to tell people, obviously, how to get in touch with you, if they'd like to connect with you, you've got Twitter there, but any other ways that they can connect with you?
Well, certainly there's, our website has got some various bits and pieces on it, and a contact form, and that's wellbeinghacks.org. So
I'll share that
those are
now
the two.
as well. Yeah. There you go. So would you like to just talk us through a little bit some of the stuff that our viewers can find on your website, because there's some really useful stuff on there as well?
Sure. Well, on the right-hand side there's a student wellbeing poster which you can download, which is it's got all the hacks, got the 18 hacks from the book, and it's quite a nice little prompts for and could start as useful discussion points for talking about the various different hacks that are good for well-being. And not on there, but it talks about it on there. There's also, to go with the book, there's an app which is really, there's a couple of things you can do with it. You can learn about a bit more about some of the different hacks, but also it's a kind of habit former. So it gives you each day, you can choose which hacks to work on if you want to do thoughts or emotions or things about nature, being kind, gratitude, and all that, various other bits and pieces. It'll give you a little task to do each day. And as you check them off, it tells you can see that it's like 3 in a row. So you can see how many days in a row you've managed to do a small gratitude task, or connect with nature, or kindness, or mindful eating, or whatever it might be. And that's all completely free. So you just search for WellSense, as it's spelt out there, Well SENZ, on the App Store or Google Play, and it's free to download.
Fantastic. And there's so much there to explore as well. Obviously you've got the channel as well, so there's videos there, so there's a lot that people can explore, as well as obviously the book, which is coming out on the 21st of August. So huge congratulations for that. And it's a beautiful website as well, by the way. I think it's really nicely put together, so, and very, very accessible, and that poster is brilliant. So definitely get on there and download the poster, have a look at the app and all the other information. Of course, go and get the book, and I'm sure it's available to pre-order already, presumably.
It is. There's a link on there. Yeah.
Fabulous. So I'll just share one more thing. As Wellbeing Wednesday isn't around every single week, I wouldn't want you to go without videos. So although the Education Wellbeing Collective have taken a break now for summer from their panels, the Education Wellbeing Collective is a collective, as the name says, of educators who are passionate about wellbeing. What we do is in our free time, not that we have much of it, but between us, we've decided to get together, and we put on free wellbeing panel discussions for education, and we're at the moment in the process of organising some really exciting stuff for the autumn. You can go back to Facebook and search for Education Wellbeing Collective, and you can see there. It's unfortunate sometimes the actual photos it freezes on when it decides, and I've tried to change that thumbnail, but it just keeps going back to that. So but there have been 4 panels there, so you can go back and watch them. They're all about 45 minutes long, so have a look at the Education Wellbeing Collective as well, and I'll just change the little banner at the bottom. There you go. You'll find us with a hashtag on Twitter as well, EdWellCol, and the Twitter account as well with that. So do come and find us there. And of course, if you want to find out a little bit more about Educate to Flourish, you can get in touch with me as well. I'll just get my contact details on the screen there. So you can go to educatetoflourish.org.uk. You can email me at fred@educatetoflourish.org.uk. Info will work as well. Or you can tweet me at eduflourish, or at my own Twitter account, where I do tend to tweet quite a lot as well, which is at Frederica_R. So do get in touch if you would like to feature as a guest in a future episode of the Wellbeing Wednesday Live, or if you have any suggestions for future guests or for future topics, or have any questions, then of course do get in touch by any of those means, or also you can use the hashtag Wellbeing Wednesday Live or WB Live. So you can find me all over social media. Spend probably far too much time on there, and especially listening to Aidan, thinking, slap my own wrist. Less time scrolling, but I do work on there as well. You see, that's my but all that's left for me to say is a huge thank you to you, Aidan, for joining us today. It's been very informative and an absolute pleasure to have you on, and I really look forward to reading your book as well. Thank you so much for having me as a guest. I really appreciate it. Absolute pleasure, and good luck for everything with the book. So remember, if you get nothing else this month, 2 books to get for Flourishing's Sake and 18 Wellbeing Hacks for Students, both from Jessica Kingsley Publishers, both out on the 21st of August. Have a great rest of the week, and thank you very much, Aidan, again.